Once again, good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for staying with us. South Africa's economy contracted 3.2% in the first quarter of 2019, the worst drop since the same period in 2009 in the wake of the global financial crisis. This follows growth of 1.4% in the fourth quarter of 2018. Stats says the latest contraction in economic growth is the biggest quarterly fall in economic activity since the first quarter of 2009. When the economy fell under the pressure of the global economic crisis, it further revealed that the manufacturing, mining and trade sectors were the biggest contributors to the fall. It reported that the construction, mining and trade sectors are in recession.
Firstly, we have seen the decline of the economy by 3.2% in the first quarter of 2019. And this was driven largely by manufacturing, as well as mining and quarry and trade. And of course, if you look at manufacturing, the contribution to the decline was negative 1.1%. And of course, in relation to mining and quarry, that was negative 0.8%. And in relation to trade, it was negative 0.5%.
To get an analysis on this, we have economist Dr. Vivian Atud from Atud and Associates to talk about this latest development. Thank you very much for coming to our program.
Thanks for having me, Colin.
All right. Firstly, one can ask, we see history repeating itself in as far as these numbers that are pointed downwards. What could be the problem?
I think the problem, in my view, is that we haven't done sufficient diagnostic. That's number one. Number two is we haven't paid important interest in redressing some of the key issues that can enable or disenable growth in specific strategic sectors of the economy. Because every economy is unique. South Africa is a unique economy because we have specific natural endowment, we have specific human capability, and we have specific IT capability, and in other sectors to develop our economy. But the question we should ask ourselves is, following the lessons we learned in 2009 and the recession, have we been able to ask, how can we remodel our manufacturing? We see a manufacturing sector where, if you look at in the auto industry and others, a majority of the work done here is assembly. We don't manufacture a core of the raw materials that are used there. In sectors where we can develop manufacturing, add value to natural resources, we don't. If we look at South Africa having mining, majority of our mining ends at the level of primary production. So we should be asking ourselves, if we want to develop manufacturing, what kind of manufacturing should we focus on? Until we answer that question, we will get back to the next quarter, and the next quarter will be asking that specific sectors are contracting, because each sector, we need to look at how do we add value to this sector based on the resources we have at the present moment in the country, because countries like China and others have realized which sectors of their economy we can add value at a particular time. And I think that we haven't really looked at that, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to us that we are focusing on manufacturing, but manufacturing certain things at higher cost, and we are less competitive in global economy scales in those kind of products. And what that means is that at the end of the specific quarter, then we come and sit back and say our manufacturing is contracting.
With so much technical expertise and wisdom that we have in the country, I mean, like, we have the likes of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, and we have many sectors of the economy that have organizations that speaks on the issue of their performance, their plight, and how the numbers have been coming in. What is it that they are missing in terms of the kind of interventionist approach that is needed to try and diagnose the problems of economic non-performance?
I think that if you pick sector by sector, the issues that they have missed is different. If you look at a sector like our clothing industry, for example, which has been dominated and almost going down the rails because of cheap manufacturing from other sectors, the question we should ask ourselves is how do we remodel our textile industry so that we can compete with China? How do we remodel our chemical industry? How do we reduce the per unit cost of production? Because that is what it boils down to. The global market is a competitive and a very rough competitive space, whereby once your cost of production from the input to the human resource and to the turnover time that you take to convert this into final products becomes very high, at the end of the day, your products become inferior in the global market.
Okay.
So we need to ask this kind of questions sector by sector, and we need to answer them, because we've seen our textile going down because we haven't answered that question.
These announcements that we've been having about investment in the South African economy, they sound like confidence boosters, but why are they not speaking to the shop floor? Why are they not speaking to the results? Because one would be talking about confidence that there's going to be investment in the country. We've heard the Ramaphoria, but this time around we cannot be talking about that when we think that there should be the positive effect of this. But right now, as you and I are speaking, we're only seeing the negative cascading effect on this, because it's going to lead to job losses, factories closing down, because the economy is not performing. So then going forward, what needs to be done?
I think when you talk of investment is a long-term. If big companies, big global investors are coming into an economy, they're not looking at short term. So the impact on GDP growth that we're currently talking about would be impacted very little by the current investment flows. What the impact of the investment flows would be is anyone's guess, because we would be watching that to see in the next 3 to 5 years what this will turn out to. Because the first thing is to look beyond the numbers. Where is this money going to? Is this money going to sectors that require the money most? What I mean by this is sectors that can help us rapidly grow the economy. Because if you put it into sectors, we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about developing. I am yet to see the new government look at how do we really beneficiate in mining? How do we develop a mining sector that, instead of ending at the level where our cries are about saying our mining production is going down, but we adding value to that production, then we would see that the value added from that particular sector increases, because we have shifted focus. Because we need to start asking in chemicals sector, for example, which has been one of the sectors that has contributed to decrease in GDP, how do we move from our focus to be more competitive in the global space? I think those questions, once we look at them beyond the investment value, look at investing them in areas where we can add more value.
Okay, we're going to have to close now. Your projections for the next quarters?
I think the next quarters would definitely be better than this. I think that South Africa is learning its lessons. We have seen the composition of the new team that we have in place in terms of new ministers that have been appointed. My best guess is that we would have a slight improvement, but we would see better improvements going towards the end of the year if they take decisive action. If the ministers that have been appointed and the various technical teams get to work and get the interest of the poorest of the poor South Africans, the unemployed, over 6 million youth that are out there, then we would see better growth.
All right. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us.
Thanks, Colin.
Right. We are speaking here to Dr. Vivian Atud from Atud and Associates. On to other news now. Standard